Black Maid rescues Billionaire from deadly snake bite. He decides to pay her with marriage. Blood soaked through my uniform as I pressed my lips to the puncture wounds on his leg, sucking out venom that could kill him in minutes. I, the invisible maid who had cleaned his marble floors for 4 years without him knowing my name, was now the only thing standing between Billionaire Alexander Blackwood and death. The metallic taste filled my mouth as I spat repeatedly onto the manicured lawn, my hands trembling but determined. His eyes locked with mine, pain, fear, and something else I couldn't name flickering across his face. Neither of us could have possibly imagined that this moment, with poison coursing through both our bodies, would lead to diamond rings, shared bank accounts, and headlines that would shock the world. But that's what happens when you save a man who has everything except someone who cares whether he lives or dies. Before I continue, please do not forget to subscribe to this channel. I never expected my life to change so dramatically on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the East Wing as I dusted the endless shelves of leather-bound books that Mr. Alexander Blackwood would probably never read. For years of working in his mansion, and I'd barely seen him more than a handful of times. He's in Tokyo, Mrs. Prescott, the head housekeeper, would say. Or London. Or Dubai. Always somewhere else, making more billions to add to his fortune while I swept and polished the floors of a home he rarely visited. I didn't mind. The job paid well, enough for me to send money to my grandmother back home and save for the nursing degree I'd been working toward one night class at a time. Besides, an absent employer meant less scrutiny, less tension. That's why hearing a sharp cry from the garden surprised me. Mr. Blackwood wasn't supposed to be home for another week. I peered through the window and saw him collapsed near the rose garden, clutching his leg, face contorted in pain. Without thinking, I dropped my duster and ran. "Mr. Blackwood," I called as I approached. "What happened?" His normally composed face was pale, beading with sweat. "Snake," he managed through gritted teeth, pointing to a slithering shape disappearing into the bushes. "Bit me." My heart hammered against my ribs as I recognized the distinctive markings of a copperhead. Growing up in rural Georgia with my grandmother, I'd learned about snakes early. This wasn't immediately deadly, but without treatment. That's when I noticed the rapid swelling, the redness spreading too quickly around the bite. His breathing was becoming labored, eyes wide with panic. "Allergic," he gasped. "Severely allergic." In that moment, everything my grandmother had taught me came rushing back. The folklore remedies, the emergency protocols for when hospitals were too far away. I didn't stop to think about protocols or propriety. I tore a strip from my uniform, tied it as a loose tourniquet above the bite, and did what I knew might keep him alive until help arrived. I put my mouth to the wound and began to extract the venom, spitting it onto the ground beside us. His eyes widened in shock, but he didn't push me away. Between extractions, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, quickly explaining the situation while continuing the first aid. "EpiPen," he managed to say. "Office desk. Top drawer." "Stay here," I commanded, as if he had a choice. "Don't move." I sprinted through the garden, across the marble foyer, down the hallway I normally only traversed with cleaning supplies, and into the imposing office I dusted weekly, but never lingered in. The drawer opened smoothly, revealing an emergency kit with an EpiPen prominently displayed. I grabbed it and ran back, my lungs burning. By the time I returned, his lips had taken on a bluish tinge. I'd never administered an EpiPen before, but I'd watched enough medical shows to know the basics. I removed the safety cap, positioned it against his outer thigh, and pressed firmly until I heard the click. His body jerked slightly, and I counted the seconds, praying I wasn't too late. The distant wail of sirens was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "Stay with me, Mr. Blackwood," I pleaded, taking his hand. It felt clammy and cold. "Help is coming." "Alexander," he whispered, his eyes fluttering. "My name is Alexander." Those were his last words before he lost consciousness. The ambulance ride was a blur of paramedics, medical jargon, and my own racing thoughts. I answered their questions mechanically. Yes, copperhead. Yes, severe allergic reaction. Yes, I administered epinephrine. Yes, I performed venom extraction. You did good, one paramedic told me, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. You probably saved his life. It wasn't until we reached the hospital that I realized I was still wearing my uniform, now stained with blood, his and mine, from where I'd cut my hand in my haste to help him. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on me. I'd just performed an intimate medical procedure on my billionaire boss, a man who probably didn't know I existed until today. Mrs. Prescott arrived at the hospital an hour later, her perpetually pinched face even more severe with worry. She looked me up and down, taking in my disheveled appearance. What were you thinking? She hissed, pulling me aside in the waiting room. You could have killed him. That snake extraction nonsense is outdated. You should have just waited for the ambulance. The doctor said I did the right thing, I replied, more confident than I felt. With his severe allergy, waiting could have been fatal. She sniffed disapprovingly. Well, I've called his assistant. The family will be arriving shortly. You should go home now. This is a family matter. Family. In 4 years, I'd never seen any family visit the mansion. Not once. I'd like to stay until I know he's stable, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. That's not appropriate, Mrs. Prescott replied coldly. You've done enough. Besides, look at you. She gestured to my blood-stained uniform. You're hardly presentable. Before I could respond, a doctor approached us. Are you family of Mr. Blackwood? I'm his household manager, Mrs. Prescott said with dignity. His sister is on her way. How is he? The doctor, a tall woman with prematurely gray hair and intelligent eyes, looked between us. He's stabilized. The venom extraction and quick administration of epinephrine bought him crucial time. Her gaze settled on me. Are you the one who performed the first aid? I nodded, acutely aware of Mrs. Prescott stiffening beside me. Well, Ms. Jenkins. Zora Jenkins. Miss Jenkins, your quick thinking saved Mr. Blackwood's life. The venom extraction technique is controversial, but in cases of severe allergic reaction when minutes count, you did exactly right. A small surge of triumph rose in me, quickly tamped down by Mrs. Prescott's icy glare. When can he go home? She asked, dismissing me with a subtle shift of her body. He'll need to stay for observation at least 24 hours. The allergic reaction was severe. Without intervention, anaphylactic shock would have killed him before the ambulance arrived. The gravity of those words hit me. I had actually saved a life today. My grandmother would be proud. I should get back to the house, I said quietly, suddenly exhausted. Please let Mr. Blackwood know I hope he recovers quickly. The doctor gave me a curious look. Actually, he's conscious now and asking for you. By name. Mrs. Prescott's mouth fell open slightly. That's not possible. Mr. Blackwood doesn't know the names of the household staff. He specifically asked for Zora, the doctor said firmly. If you're up for it, Miss Jenkins, you can see him briefly. Room 412. I hesitated, looking down at my stained uniform again. Go, the doctor said kindly. You can wash up in his bathroom if you'd like. I think he wants to thank the person who saved his life. With a final glance at Mrs. Prescott's thunderstruck face, I followed the doctor down the hallway, my heart pounding nearly as hard as it had when I'd found him in the garden. Room 412 was private and spacious, clearly the VIP suite. Alexander Blackwood lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller somehow without his impeccable suits and commanding presence. And 4 drip fed into his arm, and monitors beeped steadily beside him. When the door opened, his eyes, a striking blue I'd never noticed before, locked onto mine. Zora, he said, his voice raspy but stronger than I expected. You came. Of course, Mr. Blackwood, I replied, hovering awkwardly by the door. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Alexander, he corrected. Please. I think we're past formalities after you literally sucked poison from my veins. A surprising laugh escaped me, quickly stifled. I suppose we are. Alexander. He gestured to the chair beside his bed. Sit. Please. The doctor says I owe you my life. Reluctantly, I perched on the edge of the chair, acutely aware of the bloodstains on my uniform and my unwashed hands. Anyone would have done the same. No, he said firmly. Mrs. Prescott would have called 911 and panicked from a safe distance. Most people would have. Where did you learn to do that? My grandmother, I explained. She raised me in rural Georgia. The nearest hospital was 45 minutes away, so everyone knew basic emergency care. Snake country means snake bite knowledge. He studied me with unexpected intensity. For years you've worked in my home, and I'm just learning this about you now. I wasn't sure how to respond. It wasn't as if he'd ever asked. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, surprising me again. For what? For not knowing your name until today. For being the kind of employer, the kind of person, who doesn't see the people around him. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This was not the aloof billionaire whose home I cleaned. This was someone else entirely. You're a busy man, I offered diplomatically. Running an empire doesn't leave much time for getting to know the cleaning staff. A shadow crossed his face. That's a kind way of saying I've been an arrogant ass. This startled another laugh from me, and this time I didn't suppress it. Well, I wouldn't have put it quite that way, Mr. Alexander. His answering smile transformed his face completely. I realized with a jolt that he was handsome, not in the polished, GQ cover way I'd always registered distantly, but in a real, human way that I'd never noticed before. I'd like to make it up to you, he said. Not just for saving my life, but for 4 years of invisibility. That's not necessary. It is, he interrupted. More than necessary. It's important to me. Before I could respond, the door swung open and a whirlwind in Louboutin heels swept in. Alex. What the hell happened? I was in the middle of a meeting in Chicago when they called. The woman who could only be his sister shared his striking blue eyes and dark hair, though hers was cut in an expensive-looking bob rather than his short, conservative style. She stopped short when she saw me, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising. Who are you? She demanded. Sophia, this is Zora Jenkins, Alexander said, his voice taking on a firmness I recognized from the few times I'd overheard him on business calls. She works in my household and saved my life today. Sophia's expression changed instantly, warming several degrees. Oh, the maid who found you. Thank you for calling the ambulance so quickly. She did more than call an ambulance, Alexander corrected. She recognized the snake, administered my EpiPen, and performed emergency venom extraction that the doctor says prevented me from going into fatal anaphylactic shock. Sophia's eyes widened as they took in my blood-stained uniform with new understanding. My God. Well, we certainly owe you a debt of gratitude. She reached for her purse. We should. Zora and I were just discussing that, Alexander interrupted smoothly. And it's something I'll handle personally. He turned back to me. Would you mind giving my sister and me a moment? I'd like to speak with you again before you leave. It was clearly a dismissal, however politely phrased. I nodded and stood. Of course. I'll be in the waiting room. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Sophia say, a maid, Alex? Really? You know how this looks. I walked quickly down the hall, my cheeks burning. I knew exactly how it looked, the black maid tending to her wealthy white employer. A tableau as old as America itself. I'd been naive to think the human connection I'd felt in that room transcended the realities of our positions. Mrs. Prescott was still in the waiting room, now accompanied by Mr. Davidson, the Blackwood estate manager. They both looked up as I approached, their expressions a study in contrast, her thinly veiled hostility, his genuine concern. How is he? Davidson asked immediately. Awake and talking with his sister, I replied. He seems to be recovering well. Good, good, Davidson murmured. Quite a scare. And quite quick thinking on your part, Zora. Well done. Mrs. Prescott sniffed. Yes, well, now that the family is here, I think we should return to the estate. There's work to be done, and Ms. Jenkins needs to change out of that uniform. I hadn't missed how she'd hesitated, clearly wanting to say something far less polite than uniform. For years of working under Mrs. Prescott had taught me to recognize when she was particularly displeased. Mr. Blackwood, Alexander, asked me to wait, I said. He wanted to speak with me again before I left. Mrs. Prescott's lips thinned to nearly nothing. I'm sure whatever Mr. Blackwood wishes to say can wait until he returns home. It's not appropriate for staff to linger. I disagree, Prescott. The new voice made us all turn. Sophia Blackwood stood in the hallway entrance, her expression unreadable. My brother would like to speak with Miss Jenkins now. Alone. She gestured toward the room. He's asking for you. With a nod to Davidson and a carefully neutral glance at Mrs. Prescott, I walked back toward room 412, feeling 3 pairs of eyes burning into my back. Alexander was sitting more upright when I returned, the hospital bed inclined. He looked tired but alert. Sorry about that. My sister means well, but subtlety isn't her strong suit. It's fine, I said, remaining standing this time. Your staff is waiting to take me back to the estate. I should change and get back to work. He frowned. You're not going back to work today. You've had a traumatic experience. Cleaning is hardly traumatic compared to what you've been through, I pointed out. I meant finding your employer dying of a snake bite and having to perform emergency medical procedures, he replied dryly. Most people would find that somewhat distressing. I hadn't allowed myself to think about it that way. I'm fine, really. Take the rest of the week off. With pay, of course. The offer was generous, but made me uncomfortable. I didn't want charity. That's not necessary. It's not charity, he said, as if reading my thoughts. It's recognition of extraordinary service. And it's non-negotiable. There was the billionaire businessman I recognized, used to giving orders and having them followed. I nodded reluctantly. Good, he said. And when I'm discharged tomorrow, I'd like to speak with you further. About your future. My heart sank. Was he firing me? Had Mrs. Prescott convinced him I'd overstepped? My future. I understand you're studying nursing? I blinked, surprised he knew this detail. Yes. Part-time. I have about a year left. That explains a lot, he said, almost to himself. Then, more directly, we'll talk tomorrow. For now, go home, rest, and know that you've done something remarkable today. It was another dismissal, but this one felt different. As I turned to leave, he added, Zora? Thank you. Truly. The sincerity in his voice stayed with me as Davidson drove me back to the estate, as I showered away the blood and sweat of the day, as I called my grandmother to tell her what had happened. Be careful, sweet pea, she warned after I finished my story. Gratitude from powerful men can be a complicated thing. I knew she was right, but as I drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't help wondering what Alexander Blackwood wanted to discuss about my future. I spent the next morning in my small apartment above the garage, alternately reading my nursing textbooks and obsessively checking news sites. By noon, the story had broken. Tech billionaire Alexander Blackwood saved by quick-thinking household employee after venomous snake attack. The articles were light on details, but heavy on dramatization, painting me variously as a heroic domestic worker or a lucky bystander who happened to know first aid. None mentioned my name, which was a relief. The last thing I needed was reporters tracking me down. My phone rang just after 2 p.m. The caller ID showed Blackwood Estate, which usually meant Mrs. Prescott with instructions. Hello. I answered cautiously. Zora. It's Alexander. My pulse quickened inexplicably. Mr. Alexander. How are you feeling? Much better, thanks to you. I've been discharged and I'm back at the estate. Are you free to meet this afternoon? The surreality of the situation hit me again. Yesterday morning, I'd been dusting his bookshelves, invisible. Today, he was personally calling to arrange a meeting. Of course. Whenever is convenient for you. For a clock in the library? And Zora, this isn't a work meeting. Casual clothes are fine. After we hung up, I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what casual meant in this context. I settled on dark jeans and a simple blouse, nicer than my weekend wear but not trying too hard. At 3:55, I knocked on the library door, my stomach fluttering with inexplicable nerves. Come in, his voice called. The library was my favorite room in the mansion, 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable leather chairs, and large windows overlooking the rose garden where everything had changed yesterday. Alexander sat in one of those chairs, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked surprisingly normal, though the bandage on his leg and the lingering pallor of his complexion reminded me of yesterday's drama. Zora, he said, smiling and gesturing to the chair opposite his. Thank you for coming. How are you feeling? I asked, perching on the edge of the chair. Like I was bitten by a venomous snake and nearly died, he replied with surprising humor. But improving by the hour. The doctors were impressed with my recovery. They credit your quick action. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what my grandmother taught me. Your grandmother sounds like a remarkable woman. She is. I smiled, thinking of Gran. Raised me after my parents died, taught me everything important I know, including emergency snake bite protocols, among other survival skills. He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. I've been thinking about what you did, Zora. Not just the medical intervention, but the fact that you ran toward danger instead of away from it. That says something about your character. I shifted uncomfortably. It was instinct. Good instincts, then. He paused. I've had my assistant look into your background. Hope you don't mind. My eyebrows shot up. That's thorough. I prefer to be informed. You're a straight-A nursing student. You support your grandmother financially. You volunteer at a free clinic on Sundays. He listed these facts without referring to notes. You're intelligent, compassionate, and clearly capable in a crisis. Why are you telling me this? I asked, increasingly confused. Because I want to make you an offer. He straightened in his chair. I'd like to establish a scholarship fund in your name at your nursing school. Full tuition for you to complete your degree full-time, plus a stipend for living expenses so you can quit this job and focus on your studies. My mouth fell open. That's incredibly generous, but it's not generosity, he interrupted. It's an investment. The world needs more healthcare workers with your instincts and skill. I can't accept that, I said, finding my voice. It's too much. Is it pride? He asked bluntly. Partly, I admitted. And partly. I don't want to be the charity project of a grateful rich man. That's not how I want to achieve my goals. He studied me for a long moment. What if there was another option? What kind of option? A job. My personal healthcare aide while you complete your studies. Part-time, flexible around your classes, significantly better pay than your current position. I frowned. You don't need a healthcare aide. After yesterday, my doctors disagree, he said wryly. I travel frequently to remote locations. My severe allergy to venom is just one of several health concerns that make having someone with medical training advisable. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than most of the security personnel who currently accompany me, he pointed out. And you'd be completing your nursing degree simultaneously. Consider it practical experience. The offer was tempting, very tempting. Better pay, flexible hours, actual experience in my chosen field. But something felt off. Why me? You could hire a fully qualified nurse with years of experience. His eyes held mine. Because I trust you. You barely know me. I know enough. I know that when you found me dying, your instinct was to help, not to take a picture for social media or freeze in panic. I know you're studying to help others. And I know that in 4 years, you've never once gossiped about me to the press, unlike 3 previous household staff members. That surprised me. I would never. Exactly. He leaned back. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get better pay, practical experience, and a flexible schedule for your studies. I get peace of mind and medical support from someone I trust. Put that way, it sounded reasonable. Still, what would Mrs. Prescott say? A flicker of amusement crossed his face. Mrs. Prescott doesn't make hiring decisions for my personal staff. But if it concerns you, this position would remove you from her supervision entirely. That was admittedly appealing. I chewed my lip, considering. I'd need to see a formal job description and understand the expectations clearly. Of course. He reached for a folder on the side table and handed it to me. My HR department prepared this. Take your time reviewing it. The salary and benefits are on page 3. I opened the folder and nearly choked when I saw the figure. It was more than triple my current salary. This can't be right, I said. It's standard for personal healthcare aides with my security clearance requirements, he replied calmly. Actually, it's on the lower end, since you're still completing your certification. I closed the folder, suddenly overwhelmed. I need time to think about this. Of course. Take the weekend. The position would start next month after my trip to Singapore. I stood, clutching the folder like a lifeline. Thank you for the opportunity. It's unexpected. He stood as well, wincing slightly as he put weight on his injured leg. Life rarely follows the expected path, Zora. Sometimes a snake in a garden changes everything. As I walked back to my apartment, his words echoed in my mind. A snake in a garden. Like the biblical story, but reversed, this serpent had brought knowledge and opportunity rather than expulsion. My grandmother's voice on the phone that evening was heavy with concern. It sounds too good to be true, sweet pea. The contract looks legitimate, I told her, having spent hours poring over every detail. And the job itself makes sense. His company has operations in remote locations worldwide. Having someone with medical training isn't unusual for someone in his position. Her skepticism was clear. And what about the living arrangements? There's a travel stipend when I accompany him on business trips, but day to day, I'd keep my apartment here on the estate. And you'd report directly to him? Not that Mrs. Prescott you're always complaining about. Yes, directly to him. She was quiet for a long moment. Just be careful, Zora. When positions change this quickly between people, it can get complicated. It's a job, Gran, I said firmly. A good job that aligns with my career goals. If you say so. She didn't sound convinced. Just remember what I always told you. Trust my instincts, I recited. And? I smiled into the phone. Keep one eye open and one foot ready to run. That's my girl, she said warmly. Call me when you decide. Monday morning, I knocked on the library door again, my decision made. Come in, Alexander called. He was standing by the window, looking out at the garden. He turned when I entered, and something in his expression made my heart beat faster. Have you decided? He asked. I nodded, holding up the signed contract. I accept. With one condition. His eyebrows rose. Which is? I keep my current apartment, but I want the role to be strictly professional. No blurred lines, no misunderstandings. A slow smile spread across his face. You think I'm offering this job to seduce you? Put so bluntly, it sounded ridiculous. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I just want to be clear about boundaries. Zora, he said, still smiling, if I wanted to seduce you, I wouldn't create an elaborate job position to do it. I'm many things, but subtle isn't one of them. Now I was thoroughly embarrassed. I just meant. I know what you meant. He took the contract from my hands, his fingers briefly touching mine. And I respect it. This is a professional relationship. Nothing more. Good, I said, ignoring the inexplicable twinge of disappointment. When do I start? Immediately after my return from Singapore. 2 weeks from now. And until then? Consider it paid vacation. Prepare for your upcoming semester, spend time with your grandmother, relax. It was a foreign concept after years of constant work and study. I'm not sure I remember how to relax. He laughed, a rich sound that I was still getting used to. Then it's overdue. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Zora? I'm glad you accepted. The warmth in his voice followed me all the way back to my apartment. The news of my new position spread through the household staff like wildfire. Most were congratulatory, though I caught whispers when they thought I couldn't hear. Sleeping her way to the top, one of the younger maids muttered to her friend. Always knew she was ambitious, another commented. Mrs. Prescott was icily professional, informing me that I should vacate the staff quarters by the end of the month since I would no longer be part of the household staff proper. Only Davidson seemed genuinely happy for me. You'll be good for him, he told me cryptically. He needs someone real in his life. The 2 weeks passed quickly. I visited my grandmother for a few days, bought some new clothes suitable for my changed position, and registered for my fall nursing classes. Through it all, a strange anticipation hummed beneath my skin. My life was changing, and I couldn't tell if it was excitement or anxiety I felt. Alexander texted me from Singapore twice, brief, professional messages confirming my start date and asking about my medical kit preferences. Each time, I stared at his name on my phone screen longer than necessary before composing equally professional replies. The day before his scheduled return, another text came through. Flight delayed. Meeting you tomorrow 9 a.m. at estate instead of airport. Bring medical kit. I spent that evening meticulously checking and rechecking my supplies, reading through the detailed medical history his doctor had provided, with his written permission, and trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. At precisely 9 a.m., I knocked on the door of his private study, a room I'd dusted but never lingered in during my years as a maid. "Enter," came his voice, sounding tired. He sat behind his massive desk, looking exhausted but impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. The strain of international travel showed in the shadows under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. "Good morning," I said, setting my medical kit on a nearby table. "How was Singapore?" "Hot. Productive. Exhausting." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "The real question is how my blood pressure and pulse are after 20 hours of flying." I smiled, appreciating his directness. "Would you like me to check?" "That's why you're here, isn't it?" I opened my kit and pulled out a blood pressure cuff and stethoscope. He rolled up his sleeve without prompting, exposing a forearm corded with lean muscle. I focused on being clinical and professional as I wrapped the cuff around his arm. "Relax your arm," I instructed, placing my stethoscope in position. He complied, watching me work with curious intensity. The silence stretched between us as I counted his pulse and measured his blood pressure. 140/90, I reported. "Higher than ideal." "Pulse is 72. "Jet lag," he dismissed. "It'll normalize." "Or you could take it easier today," I suggested. "Hydrate, rest, postpone any high-stress meetings." He looked amused. "Already giving orders?" "Medical recommendations," I corrected. "Which you're free to ignore, of course." "And if I do?" I met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll note your noncompliance in my records, and we'll see how the trend develops." He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his tired face. "You're going to be very good at this job, Zora." "I plan to be," I replied, repacking my equipment. "Do you have any pain from the snakebite site?" "Occasional twinges." "Nothing serious." "May I check it?" He hesitated, then nodded, rolling up his pant leg to reveal the healing wound. I knelt beside his chair to examine it, noting the reduced swelling and healthy tissue formation. "It's healing well," I reported. "Any numbness or tingling?" "No." "Good." I stood, suddenly aware of our proximity. "You should be fully recovered within another week or two." He rolled his pant leg down. "Thank you, Dr. Jenkins." "Not a doctor yet," I reminded him. "Just a matter of time." He glanced at his watch. "I have meetings starting in 30 minutes. What's your schedule today?" "I have class this evening. Otherwise, I'm available as needed." "Good. Join me for the executive team meeting at 10. They should meet my new healthcare aide, and you should understand the business if you're going to be traveling with me." I blinked, surprised. "Are you sure that's appropriate?" "Entirely. Your job description includes confidentiality provisions specifically for business matters." He stood, straightening his jacket. "Besides, I value your perspective." "My perspective on tech industry acquisitions?" "Your perspective on people," he clarified. "You see things others miss." It's a valuable skill. Before I could process this unexpected compliment, he was moving toward the door. "Coming." And, just like that, I stepped into my new role, no longer the invisible maid, but the personal healthcare aide to one of the world's wealthiest men. The woman who had saved his life and now stood at his side in the boardroom. If I'd known then how completely my life would transform in the coming months, I might have heeded my grandmother's warning more carefully. But some lessons can only be learned through experience, and some snakes hide in plain sight. The autumn leaves were turning when I realized I was falling in love with Alexander Blackwood. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but a gradual awareness, like noticing the changing seasons only after they've already shifted. 2 months into my new position, we had settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. 3 days a week, I attended nursing classes. The rest of the time, I monitored his health, accompanied him to meetings, and occasionally traveled with him on shorter business trips. We were in London when it hit me. He was presenting to potential investors, confident and commanding as always, when he caught my eye from across the room and gave me the smallest of smiles, a private acknowledgement in a room full of people. My heart did a strange little flip, and the truth I'd been avoiding crystallized with perfect clarity. I was in trouble. This was exactly the complication I'd tried to prevent with my strictly professional condition. Alexander had respected those boundaries perfectly, never once crossing the line into inappropriate territory. Our relationship was friendly but proper, warm but contained. The problem wasn't him. It was me. I'd fallen for his brilliant mind, watching him solve complex problems with elegant simplicity. I'd fallen for his unexpected kindness, like when he'd noticed my textbook on pediatric nursing and arranged a meeting with a leading children's hospital administrator. I'd fallen for the quiet vulnerability he showed only when we were alone, admitting his fears and insecurities about the empire he'd built. Most dangerously, I'd fallen for the way he saw me, not as the maid who'd saved his life, not as an employee, but as a person of value and substance. Earth to Zora, his voice broke into my thoughts as the meeting concluded. You looked a million miles away. I composed my features quickly. Just thinking about my pharmacology exam next week. He studied me for a moment, as if suspecting there was more to it, but didn't press. Dinner at the hotel restaurant? We can go over the Singapore itinerary. Of course, I replied, professional as ever. 7:30? He nodded, already turning to speak with one of the investors who'd approached him. I escaped to my hotel room, needing space to process my unwelcome epiphany. Gran would have my head if she knew. The quickest way to lose yourself is to love someone with power over you. She'd warned me countless times growing up. I'd never fully understood until now, feeling the dangerous tilt of my world axis toward Alexander. At dinner, I was overly formal, maintaining a careful distance that he clearly noticed but didn't comment on. We reviewed his upcoming trip to Singapore, one I wouldn't be joining due to my final exams, and discussed his recent elevated stress readings. The Beijing deal is proving more complicated than anticipated, he admitted, swirling the wine in his glass. The regulatory hurdles are substantial. Is that why you've been skipping meals? I asked, professional concern overriding my personal turmoil. He looked surprised. You noticed? It's my job to notice, I reminded him. Yes. The vigilant healthcare aide. Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment? Always watching out for my well-being. That's what you pay me for, I said lightly. Is it only that? He asked quietly. The question hung between us, loaded with unspoken possibilities. My heart hammered against my ribs as I carefully constructed my response. You're also my friend, I said finally. At least, I hope we're friends after these months working together. His expression softened. We are. I value that more than you know. The moment passed, but something had shifted, a door opened just a crack, letting in a dangerous draft of possibility. The night before his Singapore trip, Alexander asked me to study for a final review of his medical needs during the 2-week absence. Your EpiPen is in the outer pocket of your carry-on, with a backup in your checked luggage, I confirmed, going through my checklist. Blood pressure medication is packed with 2 weeks extra supply in case of delays. Your medical information card is in your wallet. And the name and number of Singapore's best emergency physician is, he prompted. Programmed into your phone under Dr. Chin, I finished. Along with the address of the nearest hospital to your hotel. He leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at his lips. Thorough, as always. I try to be. I closed my tablet. Any questions? Just one. He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. Are you happy, Zora? The question caught me completely off guard. What? In this position. Working with me. Are you happy? I considered carefully before answering. Yes. It's challenging, interesting work that aligns with my career goals. And the flexibility for my studies is invaluable. That's a very practical answer, he observed. Did you want an impractical one? His laugh was soft. Maybe I did. Something more personal. My pulse quickened. Professionally, I'm very satisfied. And personally, he pressed. I met his gaze steadily. Personally, I think it's best if we maintain the boundaries we established. Something like disappointment flickered across his face before he masked it. Of course. I wasn't suggesting otherwise. An awkward silence fell between us. Will there be anything else? I asked finally. He shook his head. No. Thank you, Zora. I'll see you when I return. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. Zora. I looked back. Yes. Be careful what you wish for. His expression was unreadable. Sometimes the boundaries we build to protect ourselves become our prisons. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded and left, his words echoing in my mind long after. The 2 weeks of Alexander's absence were both a relief and a torture. I threw myself into my studies, acing my finals and completing my semester with honors. I spent a weekend with my grandmother, carefully avoiding any mention of my complicated feelings for my employer. "You've changed," she observed as we sat on her porch swing. "There's something different in your eyes." "I'm just tired from exams," I deflected. She gave me a knowing look, but didn't press further. Alexander checked in periodically with brief, professional updates. Each message was perfectly appropriate and yet somehow felt loaded with subtext I couldn't quite decipher. Singapore meetings successful. BP normal. Taking medication as prescribed. Glad to hear it. Stay hydrated in that climate. Z. 3 days before his scheduled return, I received an unexpected text. Coming home early. Arrive tomorrow 2 p.m. Meet at estate? My heart shouldn't have leapt at the word home, but it did. I'll be there. Everything okay? Z. Better than okay. News to share. I spent an embarrassing amount of time wondering what news could prompt him to cut his trip short. A business breakthrough? A health concern? Something personal? The next day, I waited in his study at 1:45, medical kit ready, trying to ignore the flutter of anticipation in my stomach. At precisely 2 o'clock, I heard his familiar footsteps in the hallway. The door opened, and there he was looking remarkably well-rested for someone who'd just endured a 15-hour flight. "Alexander," I greeted him, rising from my chair. "Welcome back." His smile was warm as he set down his briefcase. "It's good to see you, Zora. How were your finals?" "All A's," I reported. "One semester closer to graduation." "Congratulations." He gestured to the medical kit. "Not necessary today. I'm in perfect health." "I'll be the judge of that," I replied automatically. "Long flights can." "Zora," he interrupted gently. "I didn't come back early for a medical check." I paused. "Then why did you?" He moved to the window, looking out at the garden where everything had begun 6 months earlier. "I had an epiphany in Singapore. About what matters." Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. "What kind of epiphany?" He turned to face me. "I realized I've been hiding behind professionalism and boundaries. Playing it safe. Alexander, let me finish. Please." He took a deep breath. "When that snake bit me, I thought I was going to die. In that moment, all I could think was how little I'd actually lived, how few real connections I'd made. And then you saved me, and I got a second chance." I stood frozen, uncertain where this was heading. "These past months working with you have been the most authentic of my life," he continued. "You don't care about my wealth or power. You challenge me. You see me. That's my job," I said weakly. "No." He stepped closer. "Your job is to monitor my health. What you've done goes far beyond that. You've reminded me what it means to be human." My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want more than a professional relationship with you, Zora. I'm saying I'm falling in love with you." The words I'd both longed for and dreaded hung in the air between us. "This is a terrible idea," I whispered. "Probably," he agreed, a small smile playing at his lips. "Most life-changing things are. I work for you. Details can be arranged. People will talk. People always talk. My grandmother will kill me." At that, he laughed. "I'd like to meet this formidable grandmother of yours someday." "Alexander, be serious," I pleaded. "The power dynamic here is impossible to ignore." His expression sobered. "You're right. That's why I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to balance that dynamic. If you need me to find you a different position, away from my direct supervision, I will. If you want to continue your studies without financial concerns, I'll make that happen with no strings attached. Whatever you need to feel equal in this relationship, just name it." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the calculation of a powerful man used to getting his way. This was vulnerability, rare and precious, from someone like Alexander Blackwood. "I need time," I said finally. "This is a lot to process." He nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As I left his study that day, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear and hope, doubt and longing. I knew the sensible choice would be to walk away, to protect myself from the complications of loving a man like Alexander. But my heart had already made its decision months ago, in small moments of connection that had built slowly into something undeniable. The media frenzy began 3 weeks later, after we were photographed having dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the city. The headlines were predictably sensational. Billionaire snake charmer, tech mogul dating maid who saved his life. Cinderella story, how a housemaid captured one of America's most eligible bachelors. From cleaning his floors to sharing his bed, the ultimate workplace romance. Each headline more cringeworthy than the last. Alexander wanted to issue a statement clarifying my position as his healthcare aide rather than a maid, but I persuaded him it would only fuel the fire. Let them think what they want, I told him as we sat in his garden, where everything had begun 9 months earlier. We know the truth. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. And what is the truth, Zora Jenkins? I looked at him, this complex, brilliant, surprisingly vulnerable man who had transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined. The truth is that sometimes life's most poisonous moments lead to its most healing outcomes, I said. The truth is that I never expected to fall in love with you, but I did. His smile was like sunrise. Is that your way of saying yes to moving in with me? I laughed. It's my way of saying I'm still thinking about it. One step at a time, billionaire boy. Fair enough. He kissed my palm. Though I should warn you, I'm very persistent when I want something. So I've noticed. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. Saw you in the papers. Bring him to Sunday dinner. Time I sized him up myself. I showed Alexander the message, and he laughed. Should I be terrified? Absolutely, I confirmed. She's already practicing her "What are your intentions" speech. My intentions? He turned serious, taking both my hands in his. My intentions are to love you, support your dreams, and spend every day making sure you never regret giving me a chance. That's a good start, I admitted. But you might want to practice something more eloquent for Gran. His laughter echoed through the garden as he pulled me close. In that moment, with his arms around me and the future stretching bright before us, I sent a silent thank you to the copperhead snake that had changed the course of my life forever. 2 years later, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Alexander sleep. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow across his peaceful face. On the nightstand beside him sat a small velvet box, the engagement ring he thought I didn't know about. My nursing degree hung framed on the wall of our home office, alongside the certificate from the community health clinic we'd established in my grandmother's neighborhood. Life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted that day I sucked venom from a stranger's leg. There had been challenges, of course. The constant media attention. The whispers that I was a gold digger, an opportunist. Alexander's sister Sophia had taken nearly a year to warm to me, convinced I was using her brother for his money. But there had also been joy beyond measure. The day Alexander met my grandmother and received her grudging approval. He'll do, I suppose, she'd said, which from her was high praise. The night I graduated, when he'd cheered louder than anyone as I walked across the stage. The morning we broke ground on the clinic, fulfilling a dream I'd had since childhood. Through it all, we'd grown together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, building something real and lasting from the most unexpected beginning. As I watched him sleep, I thought about the twist of fate that had brought us together. If he hadn't been bitten, if I hadn't been working that day, if I hadn't known what to do, 1,000 small coincidences that added up to destiny. His eyes fluttered open, finding mine immediately. Good morning, he murmured, voice rough with sleep. How long have you been watching me? Not long, I lied, smiling. He reached for me, and I went willingly into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of him. I have a question to ask you today, he whispered against my hair. Oh. I pretended ignorance, though I'd found the ring weeks ago. What kind of question? The kind that changes everything, he said. Again. I pulled back to look at him, this man who had once been a distant figure in a world I cleaned, but didn't inhabit. Now he was the center of my world and I of his. You know, I said thoughtfully, some people might say you're just trying to pay me back for saving your life. He caught my teasing tone and smiled. Is that what they're saying? That this is all just an elaborate thank you gift. Well, he said, pulling me closer, they might be right about one thing. What's that? His eyes, those striking blue eyes that had once looked at me without seeing, now gazed into mine with complete awareness and love. I will spend the rest of my life thanking you for saving me, not just from the snake, but from a life half-lived. Later that day, when he knelt in the rose garden with the ring I'd pretended not to know about, I said yes without hesitation. Not because he was a billionaire, not because I owed him anything or he owed me, but because love, real love, is the most unexpected and precious venom of all. It changes you forever, rebuilds you from the inside out, and leaves you stronger than before. As the media would later report, the Black Maid did indeed marry the billionaire she'd saved from a deadly snake bite. But what the headlines missed was the most important truth of all. We had saved each other, and in doing so, found a life worth far more than all his billions combined. The end.